AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend attend Christmas dinner after he told my husband. He called him a babysitter. Last year, my sister started dating this guy, Jack. At first, I was happy for her. She had been single for a while and seemed genuinely excited about Jack, talking about how sweet and funny he was, how he made her feel like a queen, and all those lovely things you hear in the honeymoon phase of a new relationship. I was rooting for her because she has had a string of bad relationships, and I thought maybe this one would finally be different. The first few times I met Jack, he seemed fine. Nothing extraordinary, but not terrible either. He's one of those people who talks a lot about himself, and I noticed early on that he had a bit of a sarcastic edge to his humor. I chalked it up to nerves. I mean, meeting your girlfriend's family can be intimidating, and maybe he was just trying too hard to make an impression. But over time, little things started adding up. He made snide comments here and there, often disguised as jokes, but they always left this lingering awkwardness. For instance, during one family dinner a few months ago, we were talking about traveling, and my husband mentioned how we've been saving up for a trip to Japan. Jack quipped, "Must be nice to have summers off to do whatever you want. Teaching seems like a cushy gig." My husband just smiled politely and moved the conversation along, but I noticed his jaw tighten. My husband, for context, is an elementary school teacher. He is one of the kindest, most hardworking people I know. He's incredibly passionate about his job, constantly going the extra mile for his students, and he loves what he does. He's not someone who brags about it, but you can see how much it means to him. So when Jack made that comment, it irked me, but I let it slide because I didn't want to start anything at the dinner table. Fast forward to last weekend. My husband and I hosted a small family dinner at our house, just my parents, my sister, and, of course, Jack. Everything was going smoothly at first. The food turned out great, the wine was flowing, and the conversation was lively. Jack was his usual self, making sarcastic remarks here and there, but nothing too outrageous, until the topic of work came up. My husband was sharing a sweet story about one of his students who had written him a thank you card, and Jack interrupted with a laugh and said, "Man, you've got it made. You're basically a babysitter who actually gets paid for it." The room went silent for a moment. My husband tried to brush it off with a forced laugh, but I could tell he was hurt. I know him too well. He has dealt with this kind of dismissive attitude before, and it always stings. Teaching is his calling, and he pours his heart and soul into it, so hearing someone reduce his work to glorified babysitting is like a slap in the face. I couldn't hold back. I snapped and said, "At least he's contributing something meaningful to the world, unlike some people who just mooch off their girlfriends." It was harsh, I admit, but I was so angry. Jack turned bright red and muttered something under his breath before storming out of the house. My sister went after him, shooting me a furious glare on her way out. Later that night, my sister called me. She was livid. She said I had humiliated Jack and that I owed him an apology. I told her I wasn't going to apologize because he had been rude to my husband first. She argued that I had taken it too far by bringing up his unemployment and the fact that he lives with her rent-free, and maybe I did. But honestly, I don't feel bad about what I said. He has been crossing the line for months, and I finally snapped. Now here's where things get even messier. Christmas is coming up, and we always host a big family dinner at our house. My sister called me yesterday and asked if Jack could come to Christmas dinner. I told her no. I said he wasn't welcome in my home until he apologized to my husband for his comment. She blew up at me, calling me a hypocrite for demanding an apology when I had also said something hurtful. I told her it wasn't the same thing. My comment was in defense of my husband after Jack had insulted him unprovoked. She didn't see it that way and accused me of trying to drive a wedge between her and Jack. Our parents are staying out of it, for the most part, but my mom did suggest that maybe I should just let it go for the holidays to keep the peace. She said Christmas is about family and forgiveness, and that I should extend an olive branch for the sake of harmony. But the thing is, I don't feel like letting it go. Jack's behavior has been bothering me for months, and I feel like if I let him come to Christmas dinner without addressing what happened, I'm essentially condoning his disrespect toward my husband. My husband, for his part, says he doesn't mind if Jack comes as long as he keeps his comments to himself. But I know he's just trying to avoid drama. I feel like I need to stand my ground on this, not just for my husband but for myself. I don't want to set a precedent where Jack thinks he can say whatever he wants without consequences. So now my sister and I are barely speaking, and Christmas is shaping up to be incredibly awkward. Part of me wonders if I should just apologize for the sake of family unity, but another part of me feels like I'm justified in standing up for my husband. Am I being unreasonable? Am I the one in the wrong here? Update 1. After days of tense silence and repeated attempts by my mom to get us all to talk things out, my sister and I finally agreed to meet at my parents' house to clear the air. Truthfully, I wasn't optimistic about the outcome, but I wanted to at least try. My husband offered to come with me for support, and I gratefully accepted. My sister, unsurprisingly, said she'd be bringing Jack. That alone set the tone for the meeting. She wanted him there not just to defend him, but to make sure he felt included, a sentiment I wasn't exactly sharing. When we arrived, the atmosphere was immediately icy. My mom greeted us at the door, her usual warm demeanor strained with tension. She ushered us into the living room, where my dad was already sitting with his arms crossed, looking less than thrilled to be part of this mess. My sister and Jack were seated on the couch, whispering to each other. Jack had this smug look on his face, like he'd already made up his mind that he wasn't at fault. My sister, on the other hand, looked nervous but resolute, ready to go to bat for him. My mom tried to start things on a positive note, thanking us all for coming and saying she hoped we could put this behind us before the holidays. But it didn't take long for things to unravel. Jack was the first to speak up, and predictably, he didn't take any responsibility for what had happened. He claimed his comments about teaching were harmless jokes and that I had overreacted. He even threw in a sarcastic, "I guess some people just can't take a joke." I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my mouth shut, waiting for my moment. My sister nodded along with him, adding that I had humiliated Jack not once, but twice, and that I owed him an apology for escalating the situation. At this point, my husband, who had been sitting quietly beside me, decided to speak. He pulled out a folder he had brought with him, something I didn't even know he'd planned to bring, and opened it. Inside were dozens of handwritten thank you notes from his students. These were notes he had saved over the years, little reminders of why he does what he does. He calmly explained that teaching isn't just a job to him, it's a calling. He said those notes represented the impact he has on his students' lives and that he takes that responsibility seriously. Then he turned to Jack and said, "Your jokes undermine the value of that work, and frankly, it's disrespectful." The room was silent for a moment. I glanced at Jack, expecting to see some semblance of understanding or maybe even remorse, but instead, he looked irritated. And then, as if doubling down was the only option his ego would allow, he shrugged and said, "I wasn't trying to insult you, but let's be real, teaching isn't exactly rocket science." That was it for me. I had been holding back all evening, trying to let cooler heads prevail, but I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I told Jack that he was completely out of line and that his comments were not only rude but utterly ignorant. I reminded him that my husband spends his days shaping young minds, often working late into the night grading papers and planning lessons, all for a fraction of the pay and recognition he deserves. Meanwhile, Jack was sitting on my sister's couch, unemployed, contributing nothing to their household, and yet he had the audacity to belittle someone who actually works hard and makes a difference in the world. I told him, point blank, that I wouldn't tolerate his disrespect anymore, not in my house and not in my family. My sister, predictably, jumped to Jack's defense. She accused me of being cruel and of trying to embarrass Jack again, just like I had at the dinner. She said I had no right to bring up his unemployment or living situation and that I was clearly just looking for ways to tear him down. Her voice was shaking as she spoke, and I could tell she was both furious and deeply hurt. She accused me of being judgmental and trying to drive a wedge between her and Jack because I didn't like him. The argument escalated quickly. Jack started raising his voice, insisting that I was making this into a bigger deal than it needed to be. He said he hadn't done anything wrong and that I was the one with the problem. My husband tried to interject, but by this point, everyone was talking over each other. My mom was frantically trying to calm everyone down, but no one was listening. The tension in the room was palpable, and it felt like the whole situation was spiraling out of control. And then, suddenly, my dad, who had been sitting quietly through all of this, slammed his hand on the table. The sound was so loud and unexpected that it brought the argument to an abrupt halt. "Enough," he shouted, his voice firm and authoritative. Everyone turned to look at him, stunned into silence. My dad is not the kind of man who raises his voice often, so when he does, you know he means business. He turned to Jack and said, "You need to learn some respect. If you can't see the problem with your attitude, you don't belong in this family." His words were like a hammer, driving home the point that no one else had been able to make. My sister looked absolutely mortified. Jack's face turned bright red, and he muttered something under his breath before storming out of the house, again. My sister hesitated for a moment, glancing between us and the door, before finally running after him. Update 2. The day after the explosive argument at my parents' house, I was still reeling from everything that had happened. My mind kept replaying the moment my dad slammed his hand on the table and told Jack off. I was proud of my dad for standing up for my husband, but I couldn't help but feel a little heartbroken about how things had ended. My sister had left with Jack, and I had no idea where we stood. I figured it would be days, maybe even weeks, before we talked again, if at all. So, I was surprised when my sister showed up at my house unannounced that afternoon. She looked upset, her eyes red and puffy like she'd been crying, but there was a determined set to her jaw that I didn't often see. For a moment, I braced myself for another fight, but instead, she walked in and immediately apologized. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and I could tell it wasn't easy for her to admit she had been wrong. She apologized for the argument, for defending Jack's behavior, and for not recognizing sooner how his actions were affecting not just me and my husband but everyone around him. Then, she told me something I didn't expect. She admitted that Jack's behavior had been bothering her too, not just at the family dinners but in their relationship as a whole. Apparently, his sarcastic and dismissive attitude wasn't something he reserved just for family gatherings. She said he often made belittling comments about her career, brushing off her hard work as a nurse as if it wasn't that important. He would joke that she was just a glorified pill pusher, and roll his eyes whenever she talked about her long shifts or the challenges she faced at work. At first, she had laughed it off, telling herself he didn't mean it, but over time, it started to wear on her. She went on to reveal that whenever she tried to confront him about how his comments made her feel, he would dismiss her concerns entirely. He would tell her she was being too sensitive or accuse her of overthinking everything. She said she felt like she was constantly walking on eggshells around him, afraid to share her thoughts or feelings because she knew he would turn them into the punchline of a joke. But that wasn't even the worst part. As she kept talking, her voice breaking every so often, she dropped a bombshell that left me stunned. Jack had been lying about his unemployment. All this time, he had been telling her, and by extension, the rest of us, that he was, in between jobs, trying to find the right opportunity. My sister had believed him, even supported him financially, because she thought he was actively looking for work. She had been covering their rent, paying for groceries, and even footing the bill for his personal expenses, all while working long hours as a nurse. She had convinced herself it was temporary, that he just needed some time to get back on his feet. But recently, she had discovered the truth. Jack hadn't been looking for work at all. In fact, he had quit his last job, not because of layoffs or any external circumstances but because he thought he was too good for it. He had decided the position was beneath him and had walked away without any plan or backup in place. And instead of actively searching for a new job, he had been lounging around their apartment, playing video games, and scrolling through social media while she worked double shifts to make ends meet. My sister had confronted him about it, but his response had only added insult to injury. He had laughed and told her she was overreacting, that he was just waiting for the right opportunity to come along. When she pressed him further, asking why he hadn't applied for any jobs in months, he told her he didn't want to settle for something that didn't match his potential. She was furious but also heartbroken. She realized she had been enabling him, and the weight of that realization was crushing her. As I listened to her pour her heart out, I felt a mix of emotions, anger at Jack for how he had treated her, sadness for my sister, and a deep sense of relief that she was finally starting to see the truth. I told her she deserved so much better than someone who didn't respect her or make an effort to contribute to their relationship. She nodded tearfully, admitting that she had been having doubts about Jack for a while but didn't know how to face them. She said she was scared of being alone again, scared of starting over, and scared of admitting to herself that she had made a mistake. It broke my heart to hear her say that. My sister is an incredible person, strong, smart, hardworking, and compassionate, and it hurt to see her doubt her own worth because of someone like Jack. I told her that being single was far better than being with someone who dragged her down, someone who didn't appreciate her or treat her with the respect she deserved. I reminded her that she was capable of so much more than she gave herself credit for, and that she didn't need to settle for someone who made her feel small. She hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face, and promised to think things through. As she left my house that afternoon, I felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a perfect resolution, far from it, but it felt like a step in the right direction. For the first time in a long time, my sister was starting to see the cracks in her relationship, and I hoped she would find the strength to do what was best for herself. Update 3. Christmas came with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. After everything that had unfolded with Jack, I wasn't sure how the day would go. My sister hadn't said much in the days leading up to it, but she had texted me the night before to confirm she'd be coming to dinner. When I asked if Jack would be with her, she simply replied, "No. Just me." That short response spoke volumes, and while I didn't want to push her for details, I had a feeling something had changed. The house was warm and inviting that day, filled with the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon. My husband was bustling around, helping with last-minute preparations, and my parents arrived early to lend a hand. There was a subtle tension in the air, as if everyone was waiting to see how the day would unfold. When my sister arrived, she was alone, just as she'd said. She looked a little worn out but also lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She gave me a small smile as she walked in, carrying a tin of cookies she had baked the night before, a family tradition she hadn't skipped despite everything going on. Throughout dinner, my sister was quieter than usual, but there was a calmness about her that hadn't been there in a long time. We all made a conscious effort to keep the conversation light and festive, steering clear of anything that might stir up old wounds. It wasn't until dessert, when everyone was gathered around the table with plates of pie and cups of coffee, that my sister cleared her throat and said she had something to share. She began by thanking everyone for their support, her voice steady but emotional. She admitted that the last few weeks had been incredibly difficult, but they had also been eye-opening. She told us that after our family meeting, and especially after my dad's firm words, she had taken a hard look at her relationship with Jack. She realized that she had been ignoring red flags and making excuses for his behavior because she was afraid of being alone. But as much as it hurt to face the truth, she knew she deserved better. Then she dropped the news: she had broken up with Jack. She said it hadn't been easy, but it was the right decision. She explained how she had confronted him about everything, the belittling comments, the lies about his unemployment, and the lack of respect he had shown her and her loved ones. Predictably, Jack had reacted poorly, trying to turn the blame on her and accuse her of being ungrateful for the love he had given her. But this time, she didn't back down. She stood her ground and told him it was over. She had blocked his number and was taking steps to move forward without him. There was a moment of silence after her announcement, not out of awkwardness but out of respect. My parents looked at her with pride, my mom dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. My dad, who rarely shows emotion, nodded and told her she had done the right thing. My husband, ever the compassionate soul, told her he admired her courage and reminded her that she deserved someone who valued her for the incredible person she is. My sister's eyes glistened with tears, but she smiled, genuinely this time, and thanked him. Then, to everyone's surprise, my sister pulled out a small, neatly wrapped gift. She handed it to my husband and said it was something she had been working on over the past week. He looked a little confused but opened it carefully, revealing a beautifully framed collage of some of the thank you notes from his students, the same ones he had brought to the family meeting. She explained that she had gone through them with his permission. He had left the folder at my parents' house during the commotion, and wanted to create something that would remind him of how much he was appreciated. She said it was also her way of apologizing for not standing up for him sooner when Jack had made those hurtful comments. My husband was genuinely touched. He stared at the collage for a moment, his eyes misty, before thanking her. He told her it was one of the most thoughtful gifts he had ever received. The room grew quiet, and for a few moments, all you could hear was the crackling of the fireplace. My sister's gesture had moved everyone, and it felt like a turning point, not just in her relationship with my husband but in our family dynamic as a whole. The tension that had lingered since the dinner with Jack seemed to dissolve, replaced by a sense of unity and mutual respect. The rest of the evening was filled with laughter and warmth. We played board games, exchanged gifts, and reminisced about old Christmas memories. My sister, while still visibly processing everything, seemed more at ease than she had been in months. It was clear she was starting to reclaim her sense of self, and it was inspiring to watch her take those steps toward healing. As for Jack, we learned later that he had tried to contact my sister a few times after the breakup. He left a string of messages ranging from apologetic to angry to downright manipulative, but my sister stood firm. She blocked his number and didn't look back. She even started going to therapy to work through her feelings and figure out why she had stayed in a relationship that made her so unhappy. Watching her prioritize herself for the first time in a long time was nothing short of inspiring. Christmas turned out to be more than just a holiday celebration, it became a testament to the strength of family and the resilience of the human spirit. It reminded me that sometimes, standing your ground isn't just about defending yourself, it's about protecting the people you love and helping them find the strength to protect themselves. My husband and I grew closer through the experience, my sister began a journey of self-discovery, and Jack became nothing more than a bad memory, a footnote in the story of my sister's growth.